We're talking about how to start an LLC in Montana, and what you can see behind me is a checklist that we're going to go through, and I'm casting this from my computer here. But before we get to that checklist, what I want to do is actually talk about some of the common pitfalls that people make when they're setting up an LLC. I like to call this the LLC dumpster fire, and that's where you get set up, but you do things incorrectly or you're unaware of certain things, and it leads to tens of thousands of dollars in legal damages down the line. Now that happens when you're not familiar with terms such as piercing the corporate veil, commingling funds, registered agents, and pass-through taxation. Now, after LLC formation, you may want to consider how the LLC renewal process works and also look into things such as business licenses and permits. Now, to better explain these things and then go through how to start an LLC in Montana, what we're going to do is zoom out a little bit and we're going to talk about what an LLC actually does for your business. Now, to best understand this, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about two concepts here. There's the fact that the LLC offers limited liability protection and it also offers pass-through taxation. To get started, why don't we look at the example of owning a coffee shop without an LLC. What this looks like is you have a sole proprietor here in the middle. They don't have an LLC set up. And on the left-hand side, you have their personal home, car, and bank account. And on the right-hand side, you have the point of sale, the business bank account, the actual physical location, the espresso machine, the lights. Everything is pointed directly back to that business owner. This creates a lot of potential liability for that business owner. Now, in this example, we're going to look at owning an LLC that owns the coffee shop. It looks very different. Now you have the business owner on the left-hand side with their personal assets. And on the right-hand side, we're calling it Acme Coffee LLC, and that LLC has all of those assets. The important part here is the red line in the middle. That is something called the corporate veil. It creates a division between your personal and business assets. Now, you may recall earlier, we talked about something called piercing the corporate veil. What we're going to go through right now is explain that. We're going to do that through the concept of commingling funds. Now, commingling funds, what that is a lot of times people will start a business in an LLC, but they won't start a business bank account right away. So what they do is they use their personal bank account to run transactions for the business for a bit. This is called commingling funds, and it creates potential liability for you. Now, let's say that with the coffee shop, somebody were to get injured and they hire an attorney to sue you. What that attorney is going to try to do is they're going to try to find cracks in your LLC. And if they can prove to a judge that you've been commingling funds, the judge may grant them permission to do something called piercing the corporate veil. So when that happens, what happens with this division between your personal and business assets, it dissolves, and then they can come after your business assets and your personal assets as well. So that's why setting up an LLC is really important, but then also making sure that you do everything correctly. So tip number one here is once you get your LLC set up, make sure that you set up a business bank account right away. But what I want to talk about next is an explanation of pass-through taxation. Now, people get a little bit confused with taxation for an LLC. I've just made this quick graphic here because let's say that the Acme Coffee LLC grossed $140,000 of income. They had $90,000 of expenses, leading to $50,000 of net income. What happens is the IRS is not taxing Acme Coffee LLC. That $50,000 is passing through, sometimes called flow-through taxation. These terms can be used interchangeably. When you hear that, it means that the IRS is taxing you on your personal tax return. This is helpful because it helps to minimize the paperwork and things necessary for tax time. But an interesting thing is in the future, you can actually use an LLC. It's a very flexible entity, and you can actually apply what's called an S-Corp designation to your LLC to save on taxes via dividends. And that's going to be something that we're going to explain in the third video in this series. And yes, it is a series, and I highly suggest you watch it all the way through because, again, it's about not only getting your LLC set up, but making sure it's set up correctly, you don't have cracks in it, and then how do you optimize it in the future when you start to earn $40,000 to $50,000 in net income a year. Let's get into actually the checklist of starting your LLC at this point. Step number one is you can get this checklist for yourself. It's a free resource for you. There's going to be a QR code on the screen that you can scan. There's also a link in the description below, and it's much more than just this checklist and all these resources here. There's also bonuses. So what you can see here is there's an AI chatbot. And this is really cool because you can do stuff like how to start an LLC in Montana. And what this will do is it'll give you a guided step-by-step list on exactly how to do this. Now, if you have questions like how do I register an EIN, you can put this in as well. But later in this video, we're actually going to explain what an EIN is. So just stay with us here. But just a really helpful tool. There's a free charitable opportunity. There's yearly accounting calendar. I suggest you just download this to your phone and save it so it's easy for reference. We're going to explain what this is in a few videos as well. So just a ton of helpful resources. In the glossary of terms down here, I would suggest watching this video here. You can help save you up to $200 by avoiding common LLC scams after formation information. So just things that you want to be considerate of when you're getting your LLC set up. Now, you have to decide which route you want to go. Do you want to go through the state site? Do you want to go through an online LLC service, or do you want to go through a business attorney? For the sake of this video, we're going to go through the state website, but my recommendation would be is if you have a more complex situation, that's when you want to go through a business attorney. The online legal tools are nice because a lot of those actually have $0 plus state fee packages now. So if you like stuff to be a little bit more streamlined and a better service, you can go that route, but there's more upsells. But like I mentioned, we're going to be going through the state site for this video. Next up, we need to decide on a business name for the LLC. Now, what are you going to call it? Well, the important part here is it has to be something that's unique, that's not already taken in the state database. And then the other thing that you need to know is it doesn't have to be the perfect name, because you can always apply what's called a fictitious name or a DBA to it. Now, that is something where you can have Acme Coffee LLC is a terrible name for a coffee shop, but you can have that brand name be Espresso Yourself Cafe, and you can apply a DBA or a fictitious name and have that be your brand name. So it doesn't have to be the perfect name. But once you have a name in mind, and what I would suggest is if you don't have one, you can use a tool like ChatGPT to help you brainstorm. There's a state directory list here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go down to Montana. And then what we're going to do is we're going to search for a name here. Now let's try something here. Like if I put in Monty, here you can see there's a lot of different businesses with the name Monty there. But if I just kind of jam out on the keyboard and do that, now what we're looking at is no results were found. This is what we're looking for, is that you have a unique name that's not already taken within the state of Montana. Now, once you have a name and you've verified that it's available, now we can go into the steps of setting up your LLC. This first step here, I just mentioned registering your LLC name. A lot of times people think that's actually getting your LLC set up. That's simply just earmarking or reserving that name for yourself. It's kind of like buying a domain. You don't have a website yet, you just own the domain. So don't think if you're registering your LLC name that you're done. What you need to do is you need to write your articles of organization and assign a registered agent, and then actually file the articles of organization. So here we have another state directory list. And again, we're just going to scroll down to Montana. And these bullet points here help to explain more of the process. Once you open up the state website, it'll look something like this right here. So here is where you can register a business over here. And then we're going to click on Articles of Organization for Domestic Limited Liability Company. You see it's $35 for the filing fee, and you can file online. There's always upsells on the state website, so you can do standard processing, or if you want 24-hour, 1 hour, it can pay extra money. I'm going to do that, and then the entity will be effective when filed with the state. I'm not going to go through all the steps here, but I do want to cover a few of these going through here. You're looking at setting up a limited liability company. There are differences for different types of companies. We're actually going to talk about series limited liability companies in the next video of this series, but for this sake, we're just setting up an LLC. A previously filed reserved name will be used for this filing. That's again where you've maybe registered the LLC name. I'm going to say no. Proposed name. So if we're doing something like this, you just have to make sure you're putting LLC in it. Confirmed name. All right, copy and paste. And then consent to use name. The business name is selected as unique across all the businesses registered. Yep, okay. Next step. Entity details. What's its purpose? This is going to be perpetual, and I'm just going to say making videos, right? You can put in an address here and then the physical address. But what I wanted to go to is actually this part right here, because registered agent is a little bit more confusing. A lot of this is just like, what's the address, who are the managers, members, etc. The registered agent, what that is a third party that handles important documentation and communication for your business. Now, if you were to be sued in that example of somebody getting hurt in the coffee shop, you're going to get something called a service of process notice. A registered agent is going to make sure that you get that notice and that you're showing up to court with the necessary documents that you're going to need. Now, the rules with that is that this registered agent has to have a physical mailing address in the state of Montana, and it cannot be a P.O. box, and you have to keep one on file to be able to have your LLC set up. So this is where you're going to enter your registered agent service. If you don't have one in mind, the online LLC services typically partner with registered agent services out there, and one in particular actually provides it to you for free for the first year. We talk about that in the next video in this series. Principles here. Managers, members. What you need to know here is if you're like a solopreneur that's starting up an LLC, you're going to be a member. It's a member managed LLC. But if you have managers, that's where you may own the LLC, but other people are operating that business. That's where managers come in. So most people watching this video are probably going to be members, and then you can go through and add the members there. Documents, it's asking for supplemental documentation is not required for approval, so you can simply say no, that you don't have that. You can review all of your information and then you sign and submit. And then you're also going to pay the fee for filing this with the Secretary of State. Now, once you actually go through this process and you've done all these steps and you've filed your articles of organization, you're not done yet. What I would recommend is that you can create and sign an LLC operating agreement after your LLC formation. Now, what that is it's a situation where it's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Now, the reason for that is, let's say that you have a business partner and you guys have 10 different coffee shops now, and that person wants out of the business. Well, how do you handle that? Well, if you don't have an LLC operating agreement that spells out who the managers and members are, what the roles and responsibilities are, what you do if somebody wants to exit the business, then what you're going to get into is probably a lengthy legal discussion. It's going to be attorneys involved. It's going to be very expensive and, even worse, very boring. But that's why having an LLC operating agreement is so helpful to have that in place. The state website's not going to help you with that. If you go through the online legal tools out there, they will have boilerplate templates. A business attorney will be able to dial one in for you, but again, that's going to be the most expensive route. Next, I would recommend setting up an EIN. What that is, if we have an IRS link here, is an employer identification number. It's like a social security number for your business that the IRS assigns. And then what you can do on this page is you can actually apply for this and sign up here. It's free to get set up. You do have to do this if you have employees on payroll. Also, if you're doing stuff like getting a business bank account set up or you're applying for a business loan, it looks much more professional to be able to put in an EIN number, sometimes referred to as a TIN number. But it's more professional to put that in instead of your social security number. So this is a really easy thing to do. You can set it up yourself. The online legal tools can do this for you as well. It's usually included in like a mid-tier package, but that is something definitely recommend that you need to do. Next, obtain business licenses and permits for your LLC. There's a nice SBA resource you can check out here to give you more context. But the way I always describe this is, let's say you're starting a brewery. Well, you're going to be brewing beer, distributing beer, and serving beer on premise. Those three things require different licenses and permits to operate, and those can happen on the federal level, the state level, and the local level. With the local level, you can just call your local town hall, speak to the town clerk, and try to get to the right department and just say, hey, I'm starting XYZ business. I'm wondering what types of licenses and permits that I'm going to need. There may be also additional ones required on the county level as well. For the state, you can simply Google like Montana business licenses and permits. On the federal level, you can Google around and easily see a chart as well that'll show you which business categories are required there. What I will say is that there are different LLC services, the online tools, that will do this research for you for an additional fee. So if you're feeling nervous about that, you can certainly outsource that research as well. Now, in the next video, what we're going to be talking about is the difference between going through the state site, the online tools, those LLC services, and going through an attorney. What we're specifically going to be talking about is the fees associated with setting up your LLC. It's more than just that filing fee. There's actually cost to renew your LLC. So we're going to go into a cost calculator that we have embedded on this page here below. And what that's going to do is it's going to get into how much it costs to have your LLC for the first 5 years. We're talking about these star ratings and how these apply, where these came from. And we're going to get into why state websites can become a pain, and that has to do with domestic versus foreign LLCs. And then also questions worth asking to figure out which way you should go. And again, this is where we might get into like series LLCs and different things worth discussing. Now, before we get into the next video, I definitely recommend that you get this document for yourself. As I mentioned, it's free and there's a link in the description below. And then you can follow along in the next video in our series and making sure that you don't overpay when you get your LLC set up. All right, we'll catch you in that next video.